Chapter 2. Before it is too late. A few weeks had passed since the incident with the neighbor. Life in Daniel's house had returned to normal. Daniel still became impatient easily. If Emma borrowed something without asking, he got irritated. If his mother reminded him twice about something, he complained. If his father disagreed with him, Daniel immediately tried to prove that he was right. He wasn't a bad person. He loved his family. But like many of us, his mind had become very good at noticing what bothered him. One Saturday morning, Daniel was getting ready to visit his friend Alex. He was unusually excited, not only because he hadn't seen Alex for a while. He wanted to see Max. Max was Alex's dog. Daniel absolutely loved him. Whenever Daniel visited, Max would hear his voice and come running through the house, tail wagging wildly. But there was another reason Max was so special to Daniel. Several years earlier, something had happened that Daniel would never forget. Why Max was so special. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon. The sky was bright blue, the sun was shining, and Daniel had been looking forward to that day all week. He and Alex were planning to see a movie together later that afternoon, but that morning Alex had something he needed to do with his father. So Alex called Daniel. "Hey, can you watch Max for a couple of hours?" Daniel laughed. "Of course." Alex knew he didn't even have to ask twice. Daniel loved Max. A little while later, Alex dropped Max off with Daniel. Neither of them knew how true those words were about to become. Daniel still needed to pick up the movie tickets. It was such a beautiful day that he decided to walk there with Max. After getting the tickets, Daniel came outside, holding them in his hand. Max wagged his tail. Daniel smiled. Everything about that afternoon felt ordinary. The warm sunshine, the movie ticket in his hand, Max beside him, people walking nearby. Daniel had no idea that within the next few minutes, Max would become one of the most important animals in his life. Not far away was an underground utility facility. Most people barely noticed it. Behind a massive reinforced door were electrical equipment and other systems that workers occasionally inspected. Workers didn't need to enter the facility every day. Once the door was locked, it could be several days before anyone returned. That afternoon, a maintenance worker had opened the heavy door. Sunlight poured down through the entrance. The worker went inside, checked the equipment, and came back out. Everything was fine. He was about to lock the facility when he suddenly remembered something he needed from his truck. So he left the enormous door wide open and hurried across the parking area. Daniel wasn't paying much attention. He was waiting for his friends are about to come. Then a sudden gust of wind came. The ticket slipped from his fingers. No! Daniel reached for it. Too late. The ticket danced across the pavement, straight through the open doorway. Daniel watched it disappear inside. He looked toward the entrance. It didn't seem dangerous. Sunlight was pouring inside. His ticket was right there. He walked through the doorway. Max started to follow him. Daniel turned. "Stay, Max, I'll be right back." Max stopped outside. Daniel hurried down. There was his ticket on the floor. He bent down and picked it up. "Got you." Then he heard something, a deep metallic sound. Daniel turned. The worker had returned. He hadn't seen Daniel enter. And from outside he couldn't see anyone inside. The enormous door began to move. "Wait!" Daniel ran. "Hey! I'm in here!" Boom! The door closed. Then Daniel heard the lock. He ran to the door and pounded with both hands. "Hey! Hello! Open the door!" Nothing. Daniel pulled at the handle. It didn't move. Please, I'm in here. Outside, the worker climbed into his truck. The engine started. Daniel could hear it faintly through the thick walls. Then the sound disappeared. The truck was gone. Daniel stood completely still. Only a few moments earlier, he had been standing in the sunshine, excited about seeing a movie. Now he was trapped underground. His phone had almost no signal. The walls were thick. The door was too heavy to move. And he knew another worker might not return for days. But outside that massive door stood the only witness who knew exactly where Daniel had gone. Max. Max ran to the door. He scratched at it. Then he began barking, again and again and again. Daniel started pounding. Help! Max ran toward the road, barking at anyone who passed. Then he ran back to the door. Again and again, he tried to make someone follow him. Inside, Daniel suddenly stopped shouting. He could hear something faintly. Max! Max! Daniel pressed himself against the door. Max! Go get someone! Of course, Max couldn't understand Daniel's words, but he understood something much simpler. Daniel had gone through that door, and Daniel had never come back out. Max refused to leave. Eventually, a man walking nearby noticed the dog behaving strangely. Max ran toward him, barking. Then he ran back toward the utility building. The man kept walking. Max came back. He barked again. Then he ran toward the door. Finally, the man stopped. What is it, buddy? Max immediately ran back to the building. This time the man followed. As he approached the heavy door, he heard something. Bang, bang, bang. Then a muffled voice. Help! The man grabbed his phone. Emergency services were called. The maintenance company was contacted. Eventually, someone arrived with a key. The massive door opened. Sunlight poured inside. Daniel stood there, exhausted and frightened. Before anyone could say much, Max ran straight toward him. Daniel dropped to his knees. Max jumped against him, his tail flying back and forth. Daniel wrapped both arms around him. He laughed. He almost cried. You stayed. Max licked his face. Daniel held him tighter. You actually stayed. From that day forward, Daniel never looked at Max as simply Alex's dog. Whenever Daniel visited Alex's house and Max came running toward him, Daniel would kneel down, rub his head and say, There's my little hero. Years later, years passed, and now, on this particular Saturday morning, Daniel was going to visit Alex again. He couldn't wait to see Max. Daniel reached the house and knocked. Alex opened the door. But something was different. Usually, before Alex could even say hello, Daniel would hear paws running across the floor. Nothing. Daniel looked behind Alex. Where's Max? Alex didn't answer immediately. Daniel smiled. Is he sleeping? Still nothing. Then Daniel noticed Alex's face. The smile disappeared from Daniel's face. What happened? Alex looked down. Max is in the hospital. Daniel froze. What? He got really sick a few days ago. He stopped eating. He could barely stand up. Daniel stared at him. Is he going to be okay? Alex hesitated. The vet doesn't know yet. For several seconds, Daniel couldn't think of anything to say. Then Alex said quietly, We're going to see him this afternoon. Daniel looked at him. Can I come? At the animal hospital. That afternoon, Daniel went with Alex and his father to the veterinary hospital. The moment Daniel walked inside, everything felt different. The bright lights, the quiet hallway, the soft sounds coming from behind closed doors. A veterinary nurse led them into a treatment room, and there was Max. He was lying quietly on a blanket. He looked tired. very tired. This wasn't the Max who normally came racing toward Daniel. There was no jumping, no excited barking, no wildly wagging tail. Daniel slowly walked toward him. Hey, Max. Max opened his eyes. For a moment he simply looked at Daniel, then his tail moved, just once, a tiny wag against the blanket. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. He knelt beside Max and gently rubbed his head. Hey, little hero. Alex sat beside Daniel. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then Alex gave a small, sad laugh. You know what's stupid? Daniel looked at him. Last week Max chewed one of my new shoes. Alex shook his head. I was so angry. I yelled at him. I kept thinking, why does this dog always destroy my things? Alex looked at Max lying quietly between them. Then he said, right now, I'd give anything to go home and find another pair of my shoes destroyed. Daniel said nothing, but something about that sentence went straight through him. Last week, a ruined shoe had seemed like a big problem. Today, with Max lying sick in front of them, that shoe seemed almost meaningless. The shoe hadn't changed. What changed was how Alex saw it. On the way home, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about Alex's words. I'd give anything to go home and find another pair of my shoes destroyed. He began thinking about all the little things that made him angry. His charger, Emma entering his room, his mother reminding him about something, his father asking him to put his phone away. At the time, every one of those things felt important. But suddenly Daniel wondered, important compared to what? Maybe the thing itself was only a small problem, but his thoughts and anger could turn it into a much bigger problem emotionally. Why did people sometimes have to become afraid of losing something before they could see how precious it had been all along? Why couldn't we see it while everything was still okay? That evening, Daniel came home. He went into his room and reached for his charger. It wasn't there. Daniel immediately knew. Emma! He could feel the familiar irritation rising. His mind was already preparing the old story. She did it again. She never asks. She doesn't respect my things. Daniel walked toward Emma's room. Then he stopped. For just a moment, he saw Max lying quietly on the hospital blanket, and Alex's words returned. I'd give anything to go home and find another pair of my shoes destroyed. Daniel stood quietly in the hallway. Then something completely different entered his mind. One day, Emma wouldn't be living down the hall. They would grow older. Maybe she would move away. Maybe he would move away. They would have jobs, families, and lives of their own. And perhaps one day, Daniel would actually miss hearing his annoying little sister say, "Can I borrow your charger?" He smiled. He walked to Emma's door. Emma! Emma looked up cautiously. What? You stole my charger again? Emma immediately became defensive. I didn't steal. Daniel laughed. Relax, I'm kidding. Emma stared at him. Who are you and what did you do with my brother? Daniel laughed. Just give it back when you're finished. Emma looked genuinely confused. Then she smiled. Okay. It was a tiny moment. Nothing dramatic happened. No angry neighbor. No emergency inside their own family. No outside problem forcing Daniel and Emma to become allies. Daniel simply chose a different way of seeing the same situation. The charger was still missing. Emma had still taken it without asking, but Daniel didn't have to turn a small problem into a big emotional fight. Max was still alive. Daniel still had his sister. His mother was still there to remind him about things. His father was still there to disagree with him. And suddenly, those ordinary annoyances didn't feel quite so annoying. Because Daniel was beginning to understand something. Sometimes we don't appreciate the ordinary sounds of love until we're afraid they might become silent. But perhaps we don't have to wait for that day. Perhaps we can learn to appreciate them now, while the dog is still here, while our family is still around us, while someone is still borrowing our charger, while someone is still reminding us to put down our phone, while we still have the opportunity to smile and say, "It's okay." Because a peaceful life doesn't mean that small problems disappear. It means we learn not to make every small problem bigger inside our own mind. And that was where Daniel's real training began.